Tonight we spoke about marriage in the light of Torah. We looked at two things. Women as the nurturers in a relationship who can use their feminine perception to see potential, and using tools such as praise, shine the light that others can see it as well. We also looked at a woman's beauty, at intimacy, and understanding these as things that God gave to gift a marriage, to strengthen a marriage, and to be used in a godly fashion, modestly, discreetly, and that can create tremendous strength in the relationship.
All right, so we had a class a while ago where we discussed this idea of marriage and Torah's perspective on it, and we touched on some ideas like once. It was a while ago, so I thought we could revisit the topic, flesh out some more ideas. And in such conversations, sometimes it's better for a smaller group. It's interesting, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, when he spoke about his wife after she passed away, he said, she was he used the Hebrew term, my pnimi, which means my inner force. Every woman in a sense is that inner force in a relationship. As Kabbalah views it, Kabbalistically speaking, a man and a woman represent two different energies of God. The man being the energy of the initiator, the influencer, the giver, and the woman being the energy of the recipient, the one who absorbs, the one who nurtures. So when the Lubavitcher Rebbe is talking about his wife and saying she was my inner force, I would sort of translate that as she was the one that gave me the ability to access who I'm supposed to be. What is an inner force? Like the motor. So we when we're in our best, when we're as we should be, in our true, strong, feminine space, we're the recipients that enable our husbands to be the givers, to be the influencers, and create the dynamics of the relationship. Which a lot of times has to do with how we treat them. And when you treat your husband a certain way, and when you act with him a certain way as the one with the power to influence, the one with the power to do, to make things happen, to be the giver in the relationship. And sometimes you sort of have to coax them or help them to see themselves that way, because they don't look at themselves that way. They might look at you that way. But as Torah would look at it, that's not a healthy relationship. A really healthy relationship is when a man is really in his best man space, and when a woman is in her best feminine space. And then those dynamics create a healthy relationship where each one is really being true to their inner self. Of course, because we live in a world that's so confused, a world that so desperately needs redemption, because everything in our world is confused. So for sure, this concept is very confused. And, it would almost sound like inappropriate to talk that way. Like you're not allowed to say those things. This is not right. But that's really how we view it from a godly perspective. A woman is not a man with a slightly different body. And that's an aberration of a woman to try to convince her that she should view herself as a man with a slightly different body. Only slightly different. We want to make their bodies as similar as possible, because we don't really want to say there's any difference. And Torah says, no, there's a very big difference. There's a very big difference in their spirituality. There's a very big difference in everything about them, which sometimes makes marriage difficult and sometimes makes marriage wonderful, because we're very, very, very different. And in our spiritual energy, we're very different. And the man in his best self is in a space of giving, leading. And a woman in her best space is in a space of nurturing. And that's and us as the nurturers, and I think women may be even more, of course some men are very naturally givers in a relationship, some men are not. And some women feel awkward in that space, and some women feel that's their role. And it's really a very wise woman, a very wise woman, who can bring her husband to view himself that way by she being that way, by she being really in the dignity and femininity and recipient mode to really bring her husband to be at his best space. For some people, it's a lot of work, but it's really very doable work because it's getting into your core, each one into their core. Of course, right when you come to a class like this where we're talking about marriage, that already means you're investing in your marriage, which is great. People often say, what about men? How come they never go to these classes? But they don't. That's just one of the many facts of life. And it's something we believe is very, 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 very important. There are 24 holy books in the written Torah. And one of them, which is called Song of Songs, is a parable of our relationship to God as the unbelievable love between a man and a woman. And our sages call Song of Songs the Holy of Holies. They say all the books are holy, but Song of Songs is the Holy of Holies. It's the unbelievable love between a man and a woman, reflecting the unbelievable love between us and God. So there's many practical things we can do to try to facilitate this vision, Torah's vision of such a relationship, which again, in a sense, should be the most natural thing, because it means you really being who you are and your husband really being who he is. So it's so natural. On the other hand, it's really so unnatural to us because we're inundated by a world giving us very different messages. Just I'm saying sometimes very confused messages or very different messages about what a woman should be and what a man should be and what the relationship should look like. So sometimes we need a few little practical tips to take these beautiful ideas that in theory should just make so much sense and be so natural and try to make them a little more natural. So one thing is praise. Praise is an easy tip in all relationships, not only between a husband and a wife. In all relationships, praise is a good practical tip. It also works with kids. It also works with colleagues. It also works with parents. It's in general a good thing. You could praise your husband's physical qualities. You could praise your husband's spiritual qualities. We might think he needs to be praised, but Maimonides says that a man needs to be respected. I was interested because my husband and I were meeting with a couple, and I said, let's go back to basics. Maimonides says a man needs to be respected, a woman needs to be loved. And the woman said, no, everyone says that. I said, really? Well, Maimonides wrote it 800 years ago. I don't know who else is saying it nowadays, but 800 years ago, we can read it to you from the original text. That is how Maimonides described this relationship of a man and a woman. Of course, a man also needs to be loved. And I think how Maimonides, I should remember because last week, wrote that a woman needs to be loved, like a man to love a woman even more than he loves himself, something like that. And the man definitely needs, it's part of his psyche, needs that respect. So when I'm gifting my husband with praise, that's the way that's a very easy way. It's a very natural way to express respect. And that's really true for everyone. Praise really helps everyone be more positive, feel more powerful, feel more empowered, more capable, more appreciated. It's a great thing. I had this literally a few minutes ago. I was meeting with a woman, and we were talking for a long, long time. And at the end of the conversation, she said something nice to me. Praise. And I really took it to heart. I was really so touched by it. And it was like so funny, like so to speak, what, I need this? What do I care? What do I need it for? Why did it affect me and make me really think of myself like, really? She thinks of me like that? That's so nice. I don't think of myself that way. And it's just, we really are made that way. That's how God made us. That sincere, obviously don't mean fake, but sincere, true praise of another person really affects them. And very often, we don't look at ourselves as beautiful as we are. We're all very beautiful people, and sometimes we see a little bit of our beauty, and sometimes we don't. And when someone else sort of holds the mirror up and shows us some of our beauty, it's really like, really? Wow, I didn't know I'm like that. And then it changes how we look at ourselves, because we look at ourselves differently, because wait, if this is how I am, this is how I should be acting. That's a great thing about praise. If you convince the person that's what they're like, they've got to live up to it. So it's very, very, very good tool. So again, I'm not limiting it to your spouses, my spouse. I'm saying this for all people in our lives, for all people in my life. I should really be focused on how can I gift them with that mirror? How can I say those words that are really going to give them a like, really? I didn't know I'm like that. I know other people think I'm like that. I guess I'm like that. I never knew. Oh, wow. I'm going to behave different, because if that's what I'm like, that's how I'd like to behave. Anybody here ever had that experience that someone said something about them that made them like rethink how they look at themselves? Well, if not, can you think of a time when you really made an effort with someone in your world to really praise them, to give them a different vision of themselves? I guess not, because no one's responding in either way. So that means I'm telling you something you're not really focused on so much. That's great. That means this is very good for you to hear. It's good for me to hear also. That really, it's a simple tool that we all can do. And again, just as we, I guess, sometimes have that gift when someone like holds up the mirror and we see ourselves in a different light, we can be that person for someone else, to hold up the mirror to them that they can see themselves in a different light. It's really nice to do that for your children as well. To really try to, again, not fake. It's got to be real. It's got to be very specific, very pointed, very real. But when you can generously, effusively say real things about another person, it helps them see themselves differently. It helps them look at themselves and see strengths that, yeah, whatever. But when you really focus on it and really make it the big deal and the beautiful deal, it helps a person look at themselves differently. And especially in a relationship, maybe with a spouse, praise is even more significant because you know the real scoop. You know the real deal, meaning the rest of the world could be fooled. The rest of the world can think this person's very nice, or this person's very smart, or this person's very put together. You live with them. You might know them a little differently. So therefore, your praise is the most powerful, because you're not fooled. You know what they're really like, and you still think they're special. That's very, very impactful, because you're not fooled. Like, someone else, they could say, oh, yeah, okay, that's what they think. They don't really know me. They don't really, whatever. If they knew me, they wouldn't think that. But So when you're praising, I'm saying, especially in a relationship with a spouse, it's, even as a mother, sometimes, she's my mother, she's supposed to say these things. She's my mother, she thinks I'm very special. Just really, she's my mother. She's a little blinded. But spouses are not blinded. So you really know, and you really think highly. That's very, very, very valuable. I have to try to think like all these things, because it's nice. So now, of course, I'm thinking in my brain, wow, this is such a good idea. I need to incorporate this more in my life. I have to figure out how I'm going to incorporate this, because I know how powerful it is. A lot of times, what a woman sees, which can be positive or negative depending on the type of person she is potential. In other words, a man more sees what is, and a woman sees potential. And often that's the focus of our praise. We speak, the famous story in the Talmud is of Rabbi Akiva and Rachel. So I don't know if I've told you the story. I don't know if you know the story. So I'll say it a little bit briefly, but just to bring out that point is, so Rachel was this young woman in a very illustrious family, very wealthy family. Her mother passed away. She was the only child of a very, very wealthy man. And she sees this shepherd, and he was old. He was 40. She was probably, in her teens. I'm sure she was like 14, 15, 16 years old. Though I don't know precisely. He was 40, that I know. He was much older. He'd already been married before. He had a child, and he knew nothing. But she looked at him and she saw his potential. She saw his potential. And she knew he could be so great in Torah if he only learned. And she convinced him of that. She said, go learn, study me. I'm an old man. I don't even know the ABCs. I can't write my name. I can't read. I know nothing. She said, if you go and study, I'll marry you. I'll marry you. I see what you can be. I see who you are. I'll marry you. And they got married. And her father disowned her. And everyone thought she was crazy. And he went off and studied. And he spent 24 years studying. 24 years. For 24 years, she was alone. And when he came back, he was the greatest sage the Jewish people ever had. And he said that all of my Torah and all of the Torah of all of my students is all her Torah. It only happened because this woman looked at him and saw who he really was underneath that ignorant shepherd. It's a true story. Probably heard it before. It was worth retelling, because that's really the most beautiful expression of what a woman is for a man. Now, of course, seeing all their potential, you could also be this nagging shrew who's always telling her husband what he could be doing and should be doing and isn't doing. So we also have to package it properly. Not as this nag, but as really building someone up to believe in themselves the way you see and you believe in them. And that's truly how Torah looks at this relationship. And the beauty of this relationship, of course, it works in both directions. I'm talking as a woman to women. But that's really this beauty of this relationship, where each one really builds up and helps the other one blossom, helps the other one flower. Now this is rooted in Kabbalah. So in our Kabbalistic roots, a man embodies the God's energy of, it's called Chachma, seminal wisdom, and a woman is an embodiment of the understanding that's the development of that wisdom. Wisdom is like the spark. It's just a spark, it's just a flash. It comes and it goes. Think of it like a bolt of lightning. If you channel it, you can get electricity. If you don't channel it, it was nothing. Came and went. A great idea, you know, like in your dream, you have all these great ideas in the morning, you don't remember them. Or like, you know, someone says, oh, that same idea that so-and-so was making millions off of, I also had that idea. But I never did anything with it. So that's the man's energy, that seminal wisdom, that flash. And the woman's energy is the understanding, the development, the thought processes that take that flash and flesh it out. So that is spiritually what we are. And there's many, many metaphors for that, like the dots and then forming the line, or like I said, that flash of lightning and electricity, or a spring of water, and then the river, or a father and mother in the formation of a child. So we, as the human embodiment of this energy of God, of understanding, of comprehension, of development, of intellectual development, we tend to focus on the development of potential, which is great when we do it as Rachel did it, and not as that nagging wife doing it, not in a nagging critical style, but in a building someone up to help them see, again, to show that mirror, to help them see who they really are. So when we're in our real feminine space, then we express it in a way that's building and that's positive and not the opposite. And because we see potential, that's why we bother. And, you know, we could nag for this reason. We see he could be healthier, he could be eating better, he could take more care of himself, he could achieve more, he could learn more, he could be closer to God. We see lots of things. And that could be why we nag. But we can be feminine and be grateful for his good, and graceful, and smile, and listen, and focus on potential in a positive fashion to bring him to believe in himself in that way. Because we can, because we really, as I'm saying, this literally is our godly energy. Have you ever noticed this in relationships with your husband or anybody really, that you see their potential in a way that they don't? Sometimes we see it with our children, other people that are close in our world, that we see them in a way that they don't see themselves.
I do.
You do?
Or yeah.
So what did you do with that sight?
Well, I mean, I've had the conversation with them about, you know, how, like for him, I see him that he's very smart. Like he has a lot to offer people just with his general, I don't know. I think he has a lot of wisdom to share. And he doesn't see that about himself. And, you know, he sees that a lot of times that people just don't like him because he's not very, I don't know, he doesn't sugarcoat things, and he's very honest. And the people a lot of times can't handle that, but it's just, you know, how he goes about himself, because he also can be very harsh in a way. So he has to work on that within himself, but he's quick to just think that, just people don't like him. So he doesn't really like to engage and talk to people in conversation. So he just, shies away from it more often. And so I just tell him he has so much to share. And I think that people don't not like him, and that there's people that, all he has to do is engage, and those who are actually interested will engage with them, and those who aren't won't, and that's okay. But that's been about it, I guess.
That's great. It's great that you recognize it. It's great that you try in a positive way to shift somebody else's perspective on themselves, not in a harsh way, but just in a positive, respectful way of like, this is really what I see. This is really who you are. Anyone else have seen that? Have seen in someone else a potential they don't see, but you've seen it? Or see it?
I'm going to say I see it a lot just, with homeschool. There are days where, that are tougher than others, and that goes for any time that you're teaching. But I definitely see that. I definitely see my son's potential, and like, so, it's very hard for me sometimes not to be the nagging shrew, even with him, because it's like, I see that
you can do
this.
Just do it. Just focus. Yes. Do it.
Yes.
So how do you convey that in a positive, warm, loving, respectful way? You can do it.
I don't. I think a lot of it is just the setting the boundaries, this is what we're gonna do, and just and maintain the consistency of it, and every day we're this is our job, this is what we're doing, and and I think I've just tried to I've tried to hey, you can do this, you work hard, you can do hard things, I think that's one of our little mantras, but just to try to I guess you just said, just give him the sight of himself that I have.
Exactly. I remember my daughter, she had finished high school and she was in seminary with the post-high school religious program. And whatever she needed, she came late, and she's switching from another school, and suddenly she wanted to go on this trip, and she had to do all this religious stuff to go on the trip, and she had to raise a lot of money to go on this trip, and she just really wanted the trip. It just felt it totally impossible. And she was totally about to give up before she started. I remember telling her, but look at you did this in high school, you did this in high school, you did this in high school. You're strong, you're capable. And I didn't just say you're strong, you're capable. You're my mother. Of course, you think those things about me. Those not true things about me. I proved it. I said, you did this, you're strong, you're capable. And she's like, yeah, she sort of remembered that she was and is strong and capable. And she raised the money and did all the religious stuff and went on the trip and loved it. And yeah, sometimes we do have to show them that mirror. We can't say things that they know aren't true, but we can sort of prove to them you're strong, you're capable, you're tough, you're a fighter, you're going to do it, you're going to succeed. And yeah, just sort of gently nudge them along with our belief in them and our vision of them, and trying to share that vision, that they should also have that vision of themselves. Our vision is so much molds what we do. And I'm saying just like this simple praise, when someone gives you simple words of praise, and it molds you. It makes you think, really? Am I really like that? Okay, gotta step up to the plate. How much more so when we're saying in this relationship, a mother to a child, a spouse, makes a very, very, very big difference. And it's something that's doable. So Corey was sort of saying, well, she's trying, which doesn't really see as healthy so much, but she's doing it. So sometimes, we just have to think, like I've told you that metaphor with Rabbi Akiva, his rock, a drop, a drop, a drop, a drop. We keep putting out that good message, putting out that good message, putting out that good message. And then on his own, he'll be like, oh, I just realized. You're like thinking, just realized I've been telling you this for the past 10 years. But we just say, oh, wow, that's so special. But it's a drop, another drop, another drop, another drop. And it penetrates. And people really change. So this is one piece I want to share in terms of how Torah looks at a marriage and looks at a woman's abilities in a marriage and responsibilities in a marriage and really her role. Or something else in a totally different direction, but also in terms of Torah's vision of a marriage, is that a woman really, ideally, would be someone who's really attracting physically her husband. And it says that a woman who attracts her husband, our sages say, produces children who are scholars and God-fearing. So our sages are saying it's a very virtuous thing. Very unlike, maybe other religions you've experienced in terms of how they view this. Torah says this is a very virtuous thing. A woman who works to be attractive to her husband is a very, very virtuous thing. Because it takes a strong marriage focus. It's someone who has the wisdom to understand that she's investing in her marriage. And she doesn't take it for granted. She puts her energy into it. We're all exhausted. We're all busy. We're all stressed. We all got a lot on our plate. Maybe now more than ever before, but always they did, as per whatever was going on in their lives. So not to take your marriage for granted, but to realize it's something you have to work on, including the physical aspect of it. And again, this concept really expresses Torah's whole vision of intimacy as something really important, as something that requires work, and as something so special that when a woman does this, she has a reward, godly children, because this because you're really doing something for God here. You're really investing in your marriage and prioritizing it. It says in the Talmud of a certain great teacher of Torah, his name was Rav Chilkiah, and he was with his students, and his wife came out to greet them, and she was dressed very, very, very beautifully. And the students were like a little surprised. They felt maybe it's not so appropriate. She wasn't dressed immodestly, but like so beautifully just to go out and greet her husband in the field. I thought that was sort of weird. Why is she dressed so fancy? Like putting such an emphasis on physical appearance. Why is she doing that? So they expressed their surprise to their teacher, like, why is she dressed like that? Why is she dressed so fancy? We're just in the field. And he said, no, it's a very virtuous thing she's doing. And he said, she saves me from sin. Her dress so beautifully saves me from sin. And it's like, he's a very great spiritual leader of the people in those days, a great Torah leader. Not that we would really think he'd be like falling into sin, but he's just teaching us a concept. He's teaching us something. And again, it's so different, I think, than how it's expressed in other sources. But it's really a concept. Again, if this great sage, if this very, very godly person is saying, no, it's very important that she's dressed so beautifully, it saves me from sin. And we really don't think he's struggling with his nature in that way. But he's really teaching this to everyone else. That we really, as women, have responsibility to focus on these things, to be beautiful, to be feminine, to be loving, to be listening, to really be there. And that's, again, considered a great virtue. So is this something that you've, as you came and more into as a Noahide, that you've realized this very big difference between how Torah views these things and how you've heard it elsewhere?
Absolutely. Big difference.
So is this something that you gradually realized, or what made you like see it?
You know, I don't know that I saw it until you just said it. I just think I was kind of thinking to myself, you know, for whatever reason, you know, I did care about those things. You know, I mean, not as much now probably as I did like earlier on, but, in my relationship, but, I definitely felt like it was, you know, but it was modest, you know what I mean? It was not, like you said, it was like, there's a difference in being, you know, you can be immodest and you know, but there's a difference in being modest and beautiful. And so I was just thinking about it, and I don't know if it was even like something that I was consciously aware of, but it was something that I did earlier on. And like I said, I've kind of fallen by the wayside here and there and came back to it, but I didn't know it was, you know, that this is what it was. I just, you know, I'm thankful for
Sort of intuitively got it.
Maybe. I don't know. I'm just gonna say I'm thankful with that, because I have tried to take better care of myself overall. Although, like I said, there's definitely been some moments where there's, you know, a week here and a week there where I'm like in, you know, sweatpants and t-shirts from, you know.
Sure. Listen, we all have those days, weeks, months. But at least we know the ideal, and we know that this is considered a spiritual ideal. This is a spiritual vision of a good marriage, where a woman really does present herself as in a modest way as a beautiful feminine woman. And that's really part of this vision of a good marriage. And that it's important. It's not something that, you know, again, we're all too tired, we all have too much on our plate, and at the same time we want to prioritize our marriage and prioritize our husbands, including prioritizing the very physical aspects of the relationship, because they're all part of the relationship. They're all part of the relationship. They're all part of what God wants, and He wants a very loving relationship between a husband and a wife on all levels. He wants it to be loving and strong and building and nurturing, and just that on all levels, it should really, really, really be something that each one is supported by, each one is built up by. And we can forget sometimes, and we can get annoyed. We can be stressed, and again, the first person you take it out on is your husband or your kids or both. But then it's good to just remember the perspective and come back to it. Okay, I lost it, but there's tonight, there's tomorrow. That's the beauty of when you lose it with your husband and kids. There is tomorrow. You know, you will have many other opportunities to do it right. I mean, don't keep doing it wrong and saying it's tomorrow, but when you do mess up occasionally, and then you know you will do it right tonight and tomorrow, you do have those opportunities. And it's really important, because it's the biggest gift we give each other is a strong marriage. And it's one of the biggest gifts we give our children. Both that they have the security in knowing and feeling the strength of that marriage. Kids totally know it and feel it and get it. And also that you're giving them a model of what marriage should look like. Because if someone grows up where there isn't that strength, and there isn't that love, and there isn't that attraction, it's, you know, even if it's civil, but it sort of creates for kids a sense of that's what marriage is like. And let alone if someone grows up in a place where there's a lot of fighting and a lot of friction and a lot of tension. And then kids think that's what marriage is like. Pretty dismal view of marriage. So it really is a tremendous, tremendous gift to our children, both giving them security now and giving them a vision of what they should look forward to, of what they should build toward. Now, obviously, this isn't in any way I'm going to say the obvious, but say it to make sure it's clear based on what I'm saying. We want our physical relationships to be private. Things private are special. You know, we keep our Torah scroll under it's called a mantle, you know, protected, closed, not public display. We speak of the offering of Isaac. It was private. There were no observers. And obviously, if you're going to say or do things in front of other people, then they're not really that intimate. They're not really that special. They're not really that meaningful. If something's exposed, it's cheapened. Because if it wasn't cheap, you wouldn't expose it. You would keep it private. It would just be for the two of you. So, and that's why we actually don't believe that you should be showing physical affection in front of other people. You don't want to cheapen it. You don't want someone else to be jealous. You don't want someone else to be looking at you and thinking anything. You don't want to create any bad energy that's going to come at you. But at the same time, if there's a strong bond, it's obvious without seeing anything. It's felt, it's obvious. That's why I'm saying that when children grow up in a family, in a home, where there's a strong, loving bond between their parents, they know it. Even though they don't see anything, and you don't want them to see anything, and they shouldn't see anything. And we would believe seeing anything would be wrong. And at the same time, they're going to feel that bond. They're going to feel that strength. And it will give them tremendous security. And it will be a guidepost for them. It will really give them a vision of what their marriage should look like. So that's why it's almost like the biggest gift you can give your kids for now and for the future. And that's why it's really, really, really another layer of why it's worth it. Why it's so important to invest in your marriage and not, because a lot of times people are, as long as it's fine, as long as it's nothing's a problem, yeah, it's fine. Thank God, we get along, we're civil, we like each other, we, work well together, and we keep moving, and we're both busy. But your marriage deserves more, you deserve more, he deserves more, and your kids deserve more. And that's why our sages are saying that a very, very virtuous wife works on her marriage and prioritizes her marriage. It's not just civil. It's not just workable. It's a big priority. It's something that gets a lot of focus and attention. And that's what we want to do with our marriage. Which sometimes is challenging because, as I said, we're busy and we're tired. But if we know how important it is, even though we're busy and even though we're tired, we will focus on it. As I said, that even though we're focusing on it, we don't want to do anything in a public way that would expose things to other people. And again, especially because some people could be jealous and there could be a lot of bad energy in your direction. And again, not necessarily that anyone's wishing you harm, but just if someone's jealous, then it sort of opens up energy that could be harmful, though they're not trying to be harmful. And it's like a very delicate balance. On one hand, you really want to have that strong relationship, and it's important, and it's work, and you're prioritizing it, and you're working on it. And at the same time, you want to be very modest and circumspect in your expression of this outwardly. Just it's there. So your kids will definitely know because it's very obvious without them seeing anything. At the same time, you don't want to do something in any way that anyone else sees something which is going to instigate negative energy in any direction, because people can, and sometimes it's really something sometimes something to talk about with your husband, especially, it's two people, both have to be on the same page in this, for him to really understand this idea that we should be a little modest, not a little modest, we should be very modest in front of people for so many, 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 many reasons. And again, depending on everyone and where they're coming from and their background and their expectations and what you see around you, sometimes for some people that's such a foreign concept. But to really appreciate that that's also part of a Torah vision of a marriage, is a marriage that's very precious and therefore very guarded and therefore very, very, very private. So there should be a priority on being that beautiful, feminine, loving wife. It should be a priority to focus on. And it should also be a priority to be very, very discreet and modest. Again, if it's precious, it's guarded, it's protected. It's not for public consumption. And balancing both of that, because again, just living in the world, it's hard for me to focus on that, especially if you've been married a few years. And living in the world that unfortunately is so not modest. I don't just mean in dress, but I mean in all of these areas. Especially if you're surrounded by it. So there's no public support. It's really just the two of you. It must be very, very, very hard to really religiously be so modest in terms of how you present outward, especially with your other people that are not being modest at all. Have you found that a challenge, or not even?
I'll say that's one of the reasons I got off of Facebook. I mean, occasionally I'll go on there and, just trying to get off of all forms of social media, to where, I wanted to guard myself from it for one thing. But also, guard my family from it for another thing. And I don't know at what point it was, but I was reading, there's a book called I think it's The Mysteries of Marriage, and it's written by Rabbi Yitzhak Ginsburg. And I want to say it was something in there a lot, several years ago. And it was just kind of I don't know. It was kind of like what you were saying with the jealousy. At one point in my life, I would have seen people sharing their new ring or something, or their flowers, and be like, "Oh, that's great." But then they were talking, and you've mentioned this in classes before too, where it's well, maybe your husband doesn't buy flowers, but maybe your husband does something else, And so, I don't know. I think over the years, I just feel like a lot of social media stuff is so bad. And anytime I've ever went on there, it's I've never gotten off of social media and felt better about myself or my life or my marriage or anything else afterward, So
it's so true. And it's so sad to think how the rest of the world doesn't realize that. And therefore they're constantly bombarded by all these visions, which just make them feel worse and worse about themselves.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So you're fortunate that you had that vision to say, this is not healthy. It's not let's expose all, that shows it's really good. And this is not healthy. And getting off of social media helps you keep things in perspective and balanced and sane. And as I said, it's a hard world. It's a world that has so much confusion about all of these issues. I don't even say bad. It's bad also, but I'm saying even when it's not bad, they're just so confused. And then,
well, and I'm sorry, Sarah.
Keep going.
No, I have a question. So we were just talking about this today, me and my husband, and it's just prior to us moving to where we live now, it's family, friends came so easily, and these were genuine, honest connections where you felt comfortable with other people and very much in line with values and belief systems and so on and so forth. And then, we came here and it's been like a desert in that regard. And so we've gotten like really small, and, the friends that we have are, they're not people who like, I feel like overly share and everybody pretty much follows in line, but it's like, we're just so, everybody's everywhere. It's like our world has gotten so small. And so we don't share anything with anybody anymore. And we were just trying to see like, is that normal? Is that okay? How much interaction with other children, does our child need? I think it's just very hard. It's just so hard that are anywhere near the same thought process.
I think what you're saying is very true. It is healthy, and it is how God wired us, that we are naturally social people, and we gain from friendships, especially women. I think much more so than men. Women generally need friends. It's just part of our psyche. And a woman friend can help you in a way your husband can't, different relationship and different understanding of you just as a woman to a woman. So we need those. We need friends. But sometimes we're in a situation where we can't have any, because as you're saying, the people around you just, what they would bring into the relationship you wouldn't want. So it's like there's a need for a friend, but if these are the options, we don't want to be more than just polite with our neighbors or our colleagues, because we don't want what they're giving. So does your son need friends? Yes, of course he needs friends. But if there's no choice, because all the children around are like, what they'd give him, you don't want him to get. So guess what? You try for virtual, for children of other Noahides, for you and your husband being more there, and you pray. I definitely have with my children. I have many children, and we have a very small school here. And I definitely had a number of children that had no friends growing up. And I felt bad. Like, I know they need friends, and they just didn't have, there was no one for them. And thank God, as they grow up and eventually they go away from the home, and they're older, and they find people, and then they have friends at that point in their life. And I can definitely remember at least one of my children, I'm sure it was more than one of them having to share that, like, it was very hard for him growing up so alone without friends, because there wasn't anyone. And then when he came to a larger school, and how that now there are people, but he didn't know how to do it. It took a while. He learned. I have to go. I'm sorry. We're just over time, and I have someone here now. But thank you for the class. And I hope for each person there was something, myself as well, that we're going to take to heart and really, really work on. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night.
Yeah.